Hi, creatives. This is Hollis with another Creative Conversations here in Brooklyn, New York today. And I created this series in order to be able to create connection, have people share their individual stories, and empower others to be able to see that creativity exists in all different modalities. So with this platform, I get to talk to some amazing people and through their stories, inspire. So that's what I find really exciting. So I'm gonna invite my guest in a minute to introduce himself, and then I ask in each interview 3 questions. How do you define creativity? How do you incorporate it into your life? And why do you think it's important? So on that note, my guest, Scott Henderson, is going to introduce himself, and then we will dive in and see where the conversation goes. Hi.
Hey, it's good to see you after all this
good to
time.
See. It has been a while.
Yeah.
Make sure you're in. Okay. Yes.
All right, so my name is Scott Henderson. I'm an industrial designer, and I've been doing that since we went to school together back in 20 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And I do all kinds of design for consumer products, the consumer products world, which means a product that you and I can go out and buy in the store, like Bed Bath & Beyond or wherever, as opposed to industrial products or vertical market products, like the product that the FedEx man has when he comes to the door and he's typing things in. Those are not called consumer products. What I do are the kinds of products that you can go and buy and that anybody can
And
have.
you can see back here, these are all these are all his creations.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And he's just taught me about this. Just a little backstory, we did go to art school together, but we kind of went in separate circles. We knew each other, but yeah, so, anyway,
Yeah.
continue, thank you.
Yeah, so everything from, home decor and housewares. This is a series of products called Wovo. To products for OXO, to consumer medical products like this temporal artery scanning thermometer. You wipe it across your head.
So I don't know if other people know about this, but Scott was giving me some background. So we're going to dive into the questions, but in industrial design, companies will come to him and want a specific product. And then it's his job to come up.
Figure that out, exactly. Yeah, so like with this, scanning the temporal artery to check temperature is the least invasive way that you can check a kid's temperature.
Before it was the butt and the mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the butt and the mouth.
Yeah.
And so like, here's another one which is specifically for the underarm. So before this series of product came out, it's called the Life Stages thermometer series. There was this just long, thin probe, one size fits all, and you were supposed to put it in the mouth or in the butt or under the arm, and it was just the one size.
Right.
So like this broke up those anatomical zones on the body to be able to have products that were specific to those parts. And it just happens that those parts of the body coincide with the child's development, their age and development. So when they're a toddler, it's the underarm. When they're an infant, it's the butt. So this is the little rectal one. And then when they get older, they can do an oral reading, or they have like a temporal artery scanning thing. So this is kind of nice, like from an industrial design standpoint. This is for the little infant. They always tell you with that long, thin probe, don't over-insert it. You could hurt your child.
Right, right.
So like using the power of, industrial design, this makes it impossible. You can't over-insert this, you see?
So this is the beauty of creating something. I mean, there's so much that comes into, there's so much thought. I mean, we go into a store and we're like, oh, we like that. We'll buy it, we'll use it. But on the other end of it, there's so much that actually goes into the thinking.
The thinking, yeah. So like you said, about, right?
'Cause
That's
you can't.
exactly the reaction that, you know, all industrial designers are going for. You want people to be like, oh,
Right.
that's cool,
Right.
you know, because there's some thought there. you
Right. So he comes up with these, there's a design. Hey, Misty, thanks for jumping on. So these clients come to him, they say, we need this product, and then you do sketches, and then you do CAD. He was showing me things that he does, three-dimensional designs.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you do is you kind of go out into the world and get familiar with the territory. So thermometers or something, or baby products. So I designed this. It's like a successful baby product on
Okay.
the market for this brand, Skip Hop.
Okay.
So to familiarize myself with this, it's good to be around people that have babies. You know, I have 2 kids. They're grown up much more than being babies at the moment. But I remember.
They were at one time. They were kids
I
at
remember
one
that
time.
whole thing.
Yeah.
And you know, it's good to first you immerse yourself into the territory, you learn about it, and then you can come back and start doing some sketching, some ideation,
Makes
and
sense.
you know, I personally jump right. I do some thumbnails that are what are called, you know, very rough, little tiny sketches, mainly for myself, and I rarely show those to the client, for
Right.
example.
It's like the brainstorming process.
But I take those and I'll jump into a 3D world on the computer, and from those files we can 3D print, you know, things, and later on those files can actually be transferred to a factory, and right off of those files, steel tooling can be made, which is tooling is another word for molds, like a mold can be made, and then this is the result, the mass-produced object.
So actually, in saying that, so do you create a lot of 3D models with those?
Yeah, so like off of what I'm putting in the computer, it eventually gets 3D printed or CNC machined. But you know, basically that data that's created on a computer is useful for a wide variety of ways to 3-dimensionalize it somehow, you know. And so those models are used to verify how big it is, how well it works, its function. It can be tested with consumers.
Right.
And then that same data that's created on the computer can be rendered photorealistically, so consumer testing happens where you get to hear, you know, 1,000 users' opinion about it, and then quantify whether, you know, take a guess at whether or not it's going to really sell in the real world with some actual data behind it.
That's what we were talking about prior to coming on. Coming on is the whole thing with creating it and marketing, and how much that plays a huge role in so much, because, and that whole market research aspect, and hopefully, I mean, not everything's going to be at the same level of success. It just doesn't necessarily work that way. There are things that are going to be the lesser, the medium, and the really popular.
Yeah.
But the goal is to not put a product out there that's just going to suck.
Yeah. Well, what I try to
you can do to fix it.
What I try to do with my work is I like to first solve an important physical problem that exists with the product,
Right.
but then I don't stop there. So I think like some of my most successful designs have first solved whatever this big problem is, but then they take it to a higher level that gives people a reason to want the product beyond the utilitarian solution. So like, I'll take another one of these baby products, but
Yeah.
this is called the Splash Bottle Dryer that I designed. So like the process behind this was I went out into the world, I bought all the bottle dryers, and I noticed that they were made out of the cheapest possible material. None of them came with a brush. They were all rectilinear, and they were just pieces of crap that you would use for a little while and throw them in the trash.
So you know it would break, or it would
The
just
minute
whatever.
your kid didn't need it anymore.
Right.
And so like new parents need bottle dryers because they don't want to put those things in the dishwasher. There's all these chemicals. So like hand washing is something that new parents do. Hence this is a product.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I made it into a Lazy Susan, and I said I want to, for space efficiency, because my first thought was get rid of the rectangle.
Right.
You know, let's go
It's very
space
organic.
efficient. And then I thought, none of them have brushes, so let's put a brush.
Really? None of them have brushes?
None of them
You had to buy
came with a
them
brush. Separately, yeah.
Ah, okay.
So I said, okay, let's integrate it. So if you put it in the center of the circle, then this idea of this thing looking like a splash, like a droplet of milk caught in stop motion photography, like started to emerge. So that's what I'm talking about when I say I didn't stop at solving the functional problem. I took it to the next level of emotional meaning, giving the consumer a reason to want this beyond just having it solve their problem. So now instead of something that they need, it's something that they want.
Right.
So that's what I'm all about. That's what I try to do every time. Is to bring it beyond something that they just need to something they actually want. Right.
Which makes totally sense, and it's just great to hear that artist, that perspective of it, because you don't think about that when you're buying a product, and you're working towards the emotion, function, and emotion.
Yeah. So if you can do all of that, and then you have some great marketing people that know how to sell, it's going to be a big hit.
Right. So then let's get to the first question. So how do you define creativity?
Well, I think I would define creativity by, like, everybody's got ideas, right? You know, people walk the earth, they have ideas all day long. But I think the difference between that and a creative person is the creative person has a way of taking this idea that's in here and manifesting it out here so that other people can see it and appreciate it. So, you know, it's a big jump, actually, to take what's going on inside your head and put it out here. And people don't realize what a big jump that is. Like, if you take a blank sheet of paper and you say, okay, now do something with that, it's intimidating. That blank sheet of paper is actually, you know, it scares you a little bit, like, ooh. Right. And so, like, I think, like, if you were to define what a creative person is, it is the person that has honed their ability to take what's in here and bring it out here somehow. Whether that's being able to write it down, like a creative writer, or being able to, you know, make a visual out of it so that other people can understand what's going on and, you know, what your idea was, or just being able to articulate it. So like in design, we kind of say, if you can't talk about it, it doesn't exist. You know, and it's a really important thing. Like, if I take some design I did, which is not a good design, some concept that I'm probably going to abandon, and I can't assign a story to it, like I can't tell you about it, like what's good about it, then it sucks.
So then, I mean, then you're not also really feeling it. So
it means that I didn't think about it. Like, if I have a concept that I'm trying to sell, like during a creative presentation, during the course of my work, and I can't tell the client or even myself what it is about it that's good, then there isn't anything.
Why should they? They're like,
you know,
why is he sitting in front of me? Right.
So I think so. Creativity also could manifest itself in just the ability to be able to articulate what the idea is in a way that lots of people can understand in the same way, you know?
See, because I see creativity as, I think that it falls under many different categories beyond just the visual arts. I think that there's creativity in conversation. I think there's creativity in, let's say, public speaking, in math, in science. It's taking, like what you're saying, taking that idea and transferring it into whatever modality that they use in order to express themselves. Like, if you can, to me, if you can, and it's not minimizing what creativity is, saying, oh, anybody can do this or anybody can do that, but I guess I just innately believe that everybody has an expression of some kind within them that they can then, like you said very well, communicate and get out there, because if you can't communicate it, then people are confused, and then they're like, well, what? You know? And I think that once people find that, then they feel power. I think people feel empowered when they feel like they're good at something.
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think everybody is creative also. When I think of the word creative, I think of it in this business context of a creative versus, in a corporate setting, a non-creative.
right.
But everybody's creative. It's just that the person that's labeled a creative has spent the time and practice to become good at pulling out what's in here and putting it out here in front of someone.
Yeah, which I think is, I think that's...
And that's a whole skill that takes a lot of thinking and practice, whereas, in the corporate setting, people who are labeled non-creatives have these amazing skills themselves that creative people are baffled by.
Right, and there's so many times that these people who don't consider themselves to be creative, like if I were to point out to them and say, well, putting together like numbers and putting together like a business plan, like that's incredibly creative. All the problem solving you need to do to figure that out, all the planning, all of the grabbing information and organizing it, and people look at me and go, right. I didn't think that was creative.
And the nuances of understanding like the business models. And so I think it's really important that creative people align themselves with those. That's
a good word, align.
With people that can, that are handling all these things, because it's very difficult to do all of it. It's very difficult to be creative, in that sense of the word, and then handle all the other things that go into, like, it's not enough that I designed this well. Someone needs to go sell it, and they they have to know how to sell it, and they have to understand the tricky world of e-commerce, and how to push stuff so that a wide group of people will even see it, because sometimes even the greatest designs out there in the world become so niche that no one is even aware of them at all, except for maybe other people that are directly within that niche. So like, we're both artist designer people, we come in contact with things that all of our peers know about. But the greater population doesn't, because it is so niche and specific to, what you would call design or something, that people are not exposed to it. So the difference between coming up with a product that, editors and other designers are influenced by and think is fantastic, and one that makes millions of dollars and is this commercially viable hit, is all related to the skill and power behind pushing it out there, and marketing it.
Because with this amazing design, then you have, to all the people who have babies and all the, using bottles, like finding all those populations and getting them out there to them so they know about it.
Yeah.
They know about it.
And all the buyers that need to see it, and how you, and the information that you need to have at the ready before you can even really have a meeting with the buyer,
So many steps.
Lots of steps and lots of nuances within the process, absolutely.
Yeah. So then leading to this, how do you incorporate, second question, how do you for yourself incorporate creativity into your life? Do you see it just within your work, or how do you outside of your work life incorporate it?
Well, for me, like, design has become my life. It's if I'm not working, actually executing on it, I'm definitely thinking about it all the time.
Okay.
So it's not like a 9-to-5er activity for me. It's like a 24/7er thing.
Do you dream about it?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, the way I view design is that people are walking around like digital cameras, basically absorbing information all the time, and that your brain is like a hard drive, right? And designers are collectors of observations, and the more experience and the longer a designer's been doing it, the more there is in this hard drive, this database.
So you're like storing it in all these different...
Yeah, so like when you have to design something, whatever it is...
Like here, this. My eye is going to this.
Yeah, like, so this is a clock that I did for Real Simple Magazine's 10th anniversary cover image, and it's a one-off that they specifically only use for the cover image.
Okay. So you didn't put these on the market. Did you put these on the market?
Well, yeah, now it's on the market with Uncommon Goods, but it took a long time to actually manifest, to make it into a real product. But for a long time, it was just this thing for Real Simple's cover. And but what I was going to say is, like, if you're out there collecting all these observations, when you have to sit down and design something, or while you're out there walking around, you want to be in the right place at the right time to identify how you can apply one of these observations. So you're walking around and you're thinking, like, like the ideas are more right at the ready because you're constantly working on observing them. You're looking for them. Like a lot of the great solutions in design happen, like problems. You only see these things if there's a need to see them. You see, like the things that you're trying to observe in the world, you will overlook unless you have a need.
Right.
To see them.
Right. It's like thinking about wanting a car that's red, and all of a sudden you see a ton of red cars.
Yeah. So for me, I have a need to see this stuff because there's always some new project I'm trying to come up with a cool solution for. So I have a need to find this stuff out there, and I'm looking for it,
But does something ever like kind of catch your eye, like, oh, I really like the way that light reflects on something, so I'm just going to store that in here. So who knows, maybe there'll be a project where I have to deal with, reflection or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, do you find that like you kind of, it's not always in the moment, like this is what I need for now, that you just kind of get inspired and say, okay, not now but later?
Like, I think the Earth and, the universe has this, geometric commonality left over from the Big Bang, where, like, there's so much geometry in nature, and, if you become sensitive to the way that the Earth is constructed, then you can learn how to think in 3D and put together clever geometric solutions that everybody's going to kind of like, because they're part of this world too.
But I feel drawn to it.
Yeah, they're part of this world too.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will separate these two notions of, like, organic in nature and as non-man-made, and things of geometry and hard lines as being man-made. But actually it's the other way around. Like, there's so much hard geometry in nature that it's really kind of like the other way around, that these pure forms, these circle, spheres, honeycomb shapes, things that have angles and things, all exist in nature, so we're pulling from our Earth surroundings, and the designer has just tasked himself to become good at manipulating that kind of information.
I really like that. That's really, and it just made me think. So Arthur showed me this video on how, as the planets go around, they actually create a mandala in the way that they orbit. So the formation that any specific, I think it was like Venus and Earth, the way that it goes around the sun, that it creates this beautiful mandala in the way that it goes, like this repetition every time. And it's just, they did it like with all the planets. He didn't show me that one, but it becomes this really intricate design. Yeah. So it kind of breaks itself down to that. And line, I guess when I'm teaching, it's kind of like line is shape, which then creates an object. Because a lot of times people have difficulty within an art context of seeing things, of creating it as a whole. It has to be broken down into the first steps, to the second step, to the third step, so it's not so overwhelming. Yeah. Like you said, kind of about a blank piece of paper being overwhelming.
Right, yeah, I'm really into that idea of sensitizing yourself to this stimuli in a way where it's not as overwhelming as you might think it is. Like, there's the periodic table of elements where everything made of mass comes from these finite things, these elements. There's almost a periodic table of design elements also, where anything that the human being can think of exists in some raw form out there that is not like no designer or artist is creating something that has never existed before. There's elements of it that are being restitched together to create what appears to be something new.
Right.
So if you think about it that way, it's not as intimidating, you know. I'm really into this idea too, like of the DNA of the Earth showing itself in these unexpected ways. So like, if you were to take the graphic image of the human brain and how it fires off these synapses and you know, it kind of looks like this web of like an electric spider web, right? That's what it looks like. Now, if you were to zoom away from the entire universe itself, it almost looks, at least graphically, like the brain does.
Wow.
You know?
See, we're getting philosophical. I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's deep. Like, it's really deep stuff. It's just, it's so cool when we take for granted so much. I feel that we kind of walk, because I feel like we're overloaded with so much stimuli all the time that we have to kind of, for our sanity in a sense, we have to pick and choose what to pay attention to. It's like, so Scott lives in New York. How long have you lived in New York for?
20, 30 years, I don't know.
Okay, so this is a little off topic. It's within, so Arthur and I lived in New York for 8 years, many years ago. We've been in the suburbs. We've been in New Jersey for when our son he's 19 now, so anyway, for about 16 years we've been in the suburbs. But in New York, what I loved and hated about it was I feel safer in New York than I do in Philadelphia, because I feel like there are people around all the time. I feel like people are so warm in New York. Like, not warm, that's not the word. I feel like people in New York will be there for you if you needed them to. But I feel like you also walk around in a protective bubble because you're being touched all the time, and you're being like that. You feel like sometimes you're like, just get the hell off me, or get out of my space.
Like in the subway.
Like in the subway. But then I had the most beautiful story, which very quickly, I was pregnant with my first child, very pregnant, and it was rush hour. And I was probably looking a little nervous, trying to see how I was going to get my way out. And this is just an example of a New York moment that was just amazing. So I was kind of like looking, and all of a sudden, this tall African-American man came through, and he took my arm. And I at first was just kind of like, for personal space, when anybody comes to you, I was just kind of like, but my space, what are you doing? And he led me through, and he said, pregnant woman coming through. And he led me to the door, and the doors opened, and I walked out.
Yeah.
And I started to cry. I was just like, thank you so much. Like, and he just tipped his hat, and he went, we have to stay together. And I was just like, oh my God. Yeah. Because I think that you need to protect yourself, but there's so much around us all the time. It's like what I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So, so New York is pretty incredible for the energy and all that. It's just a lot going on at one time.
Yeah, I love it here. I love just having all the humanity around, and it's a very inspiring place.
And he's in Dumbo, which is in Brooklyn.
Yeah. Right
across the water and from Manhattan, and it's pretty, Yeah, do
you know what Dumbo stands for?
No, I don't.
A lot of people don't.
I should. I will admit.
It stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. It's just an acronym for the bridge. So Dumbo is right between the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in New York City. It's one of the most photographed neighborhoods in New York City. And where I am here in this building, almost all the businesses are designers, architects, new media design.
The whole area is really, it's just walking in, it's so industrial and clean lines, and it's very welcoming when you come in.
Yeah, and there's even fine artists. So right down the hall, I have a fine art. There's a guy that paints, fine art. and that's common throughout the Two Trees buildings because they're very supportive of fine arts, and so there's a few very well-known painters and things right here in the building.
Oh wow!
So it's cool. Yeah, it's cool to know that, here I am coming in. I'm doing sort of this, technical work and industrial design, and I can smell the linseed oil and the turpentine right down the hall. Yeah, it's awesome.
The floors.
Yeah.
So then, for the third and final question, why do you think that creativity is important?
I think it's important. It's just life, It's like to be able to express something. It inspires other people, and it's such a skill that things would sort of cease if people were not able to manifest their ideas somehow.
We're all robots.
Yeah, and it pushes things forward. And I think the longer you stay at it and try to master, whatever creative field you're in, the more impactful your pieces, your work, your output will be, and then that's going to inspire the younger generations and keep things rolling forward, So.
Nice, and we don't want to be robots.
No.
We don't want to be these automatons that are just have these, it's a whole other thing with having screens in front of us all the time and just kind of walking around because that is
screens are okay if you're using them right,
They have it's like that movie
It's
Wall-E.
nice to be able to have an entire computer in your hand. I mean, I use that all the time,
I guess I'm just thinking, the reference was to the movie Wall-E.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but how
Right.
everybody, they're sitting there, nobody's walking, they're all being carried around staring at the screen in front of them, and then once it all stops, all of a sudden they were like, oh, I didn't know that was around me. They didn't stop to look because they were just staring at the screen the whole time.
Yeah, I saw some photographer or somebody did a series of photographs of people waiting for the elevator or walking around the street, and he photoshopped the phone out of their hands.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes. Yeah.
And that's cool because
it is.
Basically it's all these people standing there with their hands like this.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hysterical.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's pretty cool. So, well, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I appreciate you taking your time. I know you're busy.
Come back anytime.
So, thank you. So, if you're watching the replay, #replay, and if you're interested in wanting to join the creative conversations, just message me, and I'd love to hear feedback or whatever you have to say in the comments. So, have a great rest of the day. Bye.